Hello and welcome to Newsfeed, your daily dose of what people are talking about online, from news stories to what's trending. Now, Brazil needs a runoff vote to decide the leader of Latin America's largest democracy. Both Jair Bolsonaro and Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva failed to secure a majority in Sunday's first round. The two men are the country's most prominent and polarizing politicians. Right-wing incumbent President Bolsonaro has been criticized for his government's role in the deforestation of the Amazon, a massive rise in poverty, and the deaths of nearly 700,000 Brazilians from the coronavirus. For months leading up to the election, opinion polls showed that Bolsonaro was trailing badly and would struggle to win enough votes for a runoff. But the president outperformed forecasts, although he still has a lot of ground to gain over the next 4 weeks. Former President Lula da Silva was convicted on corruption charges after he left office back in 2021. But after the court overturned his conviction, he's back on the political scene, seeking to become Brazil's next president. With 99.9% of votes counted, Lula has taken 48% versus 43% for Bolsonaro. As neither got the majority, the race will go to a second round scheduled for October the 30th. Both men have starkly different visions for Brazil, and both will face a host of challenges if elected. Meanwhile, Bolsonaro has some unexpected fans, as this TikTok video shows. Brazilian football star Neymar showed his support for the far-right candidate. In a video posted to TikTok, the Paris Saint-Germain forward is seen dancing to Bolsonaro's campaign song ahead of the weekend vote. And there was backlash to Neymar's support of the far-right leader, who has been criticized in the past for his misogynistic, racist, and anti-environment policies. One fan tweeted they couldn't believe Neymar backed the Brazilian Donald Trump. Neymar took to Twitter to defend himself following the criticism over the video, saying, quote, "They talk about democracy, but when someone has a different opinion, they're attacked by the very people who speak about democracy. Go figure." Bosnia and Herzegovina also had elections over the weekend. The Balkan nation is said to have one of the most complicated systems of government in the world. So I'm probably not the best person to explain what's going on there. Fortunately, we have an expert to help out. Here's Abdul Wahab.
On Sunday, Bosnia and Herzegovina held its parliamentary and presidential elections amid its worst political crisis since the end of the war in 1995. When we talk about Bosnia and elections, it's home to the world's most complicated political system, which dates back in the Dayton Peace Agreement. The Dayton Peace Accord was signed in 1995 and ended the war, but it also built an extremely complex system which had made government extremely difficult. It created a system in one country, two entities, the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina and the Republika Srpska. The federation is predominantly populated by Muslim Bosnians and Catholic Croats, whilst the Republika Srpska is predominantly inhabited with Orthodox Serbs. It also created a direct elected tripartite presidency, which is in charge of foreign, diplomatic, military affairs and the budget of the state-level institutions. The three presidency members are from three constituent nations, one Bosniak, one Croat and one Serb. It's almost clear who will win the three members of the country's three ethnic presidency. A Social Democrat Bečirović will replace the conservative Bosniak leader Bakir Izetbegović. Even though Izetbegović lost elections, his party remains the strongest in the parliament. The Croat member will most probably be Željko Komšić, a Sarajevo-based politician who won elections against Croatian conservative ethnic leader Skriško. The Serb member of presidency is outgoing Republika Srpska President Željko Cvijanović, who switched positions with Milorad Dodik, the ethnic Serb secessionist leader who declared victory on the Republika Srpska presidential elections last night. For the first time, a woman will have a seat in the tripartite presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina. The office of High Representative in Bosnia and Herzegovina was created in 1995 and immediately after the signing of the Dayton Agreement. Its job is to oversee the implementation of Dayton Agreement. After the majority of the polling station last night in Bosnia Herzegovina closed, High Representative in Bosnia Herzegovina Christian Schmidt has used his called bomb powers to impose bitterly opposed changes to the country electoral law, which have been very much criticized by the local but international experts and politicians as well.
Indonesians are demanding answers days after a football match in East Java turned into one of the world's worst stadium disasters. Home fans rushed onto the pitch after Arema FC lost to longtime rivals Persebaya Surabaya. Police then responded by firing tear gas. In the panic to escape, people were trampled and crushed at the stadium's exits. At least 125 people, including dozens of children, died. The stadium was at overcapacity, packed with more than 42,000 fans. After the tragedy, the world's governing football body FIFA said that crowd control gas should never be used at matches. The Indonesian government has launched an investigation following allegations of heavy-handed policing.
I don't think they know exactly how to manage an escalation of conflict inside an enclosed space like a football stadium. The fact that they resort readily to tear gas is a big problem. What can they do better? Well, perhaps it needs a real reshuffling of what we know as crowd safety management now in football related terms. More use of CCTV to identify the source of the problems, to identify the spark before it lit the fire, to learn more about crowd dynamics, to learn more and to know the flow of people in and out of the stadiums. Where are the choke points? What to do if there's a choke point? Is there a central command that can give orders readily where he sees the situation as full as it is and from a vantage point? The fatality numbers is just unacceptable in 2022. It could happen in Hillsborough in 1989 or other tragic events like in Accra in Ghana and one other in Chile, if I'm not mistaken, in 1964, but not and never should happen in 2022.
There's also been an outpouring of reaction on Twitter. Goal.com correspondent Neil Jones tweeted unthinkably tragic at a football match. While journalist Nathan Koka said Indonesia only makes headlines when there's some tragedy. I wish the global media would also pay attention when there's not a terrorist attack, plane crash, tsunami, or stampede. Meanwhile, vigils have been held across Indonesia.
I'm in Malang, East Java. This is one of the city squares. You can see there are so many people here, and they are gathered to pay their respects to those who have lost their lives in the riot that happened on Saturday night. This is the world's worst sporting incident, and certainly the worst that Indonesia has ever seen. According to officials and authorities, a lot of the lives that were lost are supporters of the Arema football club, and this loss is what ignited the riot that happened on Saturday. This is the names of the supporters from the Arema football club. It is a very nice way of people coming together and showing togetherness and solidarity here in Malang.
To great fanfare on Friday, President Vladimir Putin of Russia signed treaties to annex 4 regions of Ukraine. But events over the weekend have not gone Moscow's way as Ukraine continues to take back its territory occupied by Russian troops. Perhaps most significantly is the eastern city of Lyman. It's a crucially strategic hub which gives Ukraine a strong foothold for further advances into the Donbass region. Our defense analyst Ubay Shabanda has been examining the latest setbacks for Russia.
So the city of Lyman in Donetsk in the east is operationally very important. The fact that the Ukrainians have been able to liberate the city from Russian control. And that's because it sits on a key road that controls a river crossing across the Seversky Donetsk River. And this is an area where the Russian forces in the east have been trying to consolidate their defenses in the wake of a determined Ukrainian counteroffensive that began in earnest in September, managed to liberate large swaths of Kharkiv, and now the Ukrainians are pushing south from Izium and down into Lyman. And this is also a big political setback for the Russians, because remember, it was just on Friday the president of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, announced that Russia is going to annex 4 regions, 2 of which are Donetsk and Luhansk, that the Ukrainians are actively contesting. They want to regain their territory. And they don't recognize that Russian annexation. So militarily, it's both a political and operational setback. And this has been part of the Ukrainian strategy that's allowed them to regain so much of their territory since September, to capture these key river crossings of the Severodonetsk and Oskol rivers, and to cut off a critical line of supply for thousands of frontline Russian soldiers. And that's what forced the Russian military to withdraw from the city of Lyman, because they were essentially almost about to be completely encircled. And according to the latest report from the UK Defense Intelligence, those Russian forces that were retreating from the city of Lyman also suffered heavy casualties, because that road was under what we call fire control by the Ukrainian military. So that last remaining road that was going into the city of Lyman. And now Ukrainian forces are pushing even deeper into Donetsk, going up to the border of Luhansk province. And that essentially threatens the bridgehead that the Russians had established in this area, trying to launch offensives into the remaining Ukrainian strongholds in Donetsk. And that puts the Russians firmly in the defensive, and it seriously imperils the Russian military's plan to try to control all of Donetsk and Luhansk as the Ukrainian counteroffensive continues to make fresh gains.
And in Dnipro in southern Ukraine, we have the sad story of a dog named Crimea. He's the only survivor of a Russian missile attack on the home of a Ukrainian family. The bombing took the lives of a mother, her 2 children, and their grandmother. When rescuers arrived at the rubble of the house, they found him howling. Needless to say, these images have gone viral. Olga Rudenko, editor of the Kyiv Independent, tweeted saying that the dog received veterinary care after being rescued. Ukrainian activist Alexandra Matvichuk said that the news spread first by word of mouth after friends checked on friends in the region. And Canadian academic Michael McKay said that the story had inspired art that serves as a symbol of resistance for Dnipro, caught in some of the fiercest fighting. All right, on to what's trending. Coffee. Well, what would your workday be without it? Whether you love it or hate it, there's no denying that coffee is one of the most consumed beverages worldwide. An estimated 2.2 billion cups of it are consumed each day. But while enjoying your daily cuppa, did you ever wonder how it came to be so ubiquitous?
You have no idea what coffee has gone through before it became our best friend and medicine. Okay, we all love coffee, even if it gives some of us anxiety and the rest of us the runs. Or both, like in my case.
It used to be a luxury item that only certain people could afford or obtain, but now it's a staple in almost every home. But until it became this really accessible drink today, coffee was the subject of political and religious debates for centuries. It was dubbed the devil's cup, Satan's drink, the Muslim drink, and a whole lot of other stuff. I just want to apologize to you on behalf of humanity for how cruel we've been to you.
Coffee is believed to have originated in Ethiopia, where it was reportedly discovered. It then spread to Yemen and other countries by the 15th century, reaching Mecca, Cairo, and the Ottoman Empire. Coffee became especially widespread in Ottoman lands during the era of Suleiman the Magnificent in the 16th century. And thanks to the Ottomans, coffee houses started popping up in the region. They were places where people could meet and talk while sipping on that black cuppa. European travelers who would visit the Near East would bring back stories of an unusual dark black beverage, and by the 17th century, coffee entered the chat in Europe and became popular across the continent.
You're so welcome.
But before it became the drink of inspiration and fuel of great innovators and thinkers, let's talk about how it was vilified for a minute.
In Europe, it was condemned when it came to Venice in 1615. Some Catholics decried it as the bitter invention of Satan, which carried the whiff of Islam.
It was so controversial that Pope Clement VIII intervened and wanted to taste it for himself to decide whether it should be banned or not. He liked what he got, and so he gave it papal approval. Apparently, he said, "The devil's drink is so delicious, it would be a pity to let the infidels have exclusive use of it. We should cheat the devil by baptizing it." So he came to be known as the Pope who baptized the devil's drink.
So that good old Satan's drink started to gain popularity in Europe.
And by the mid-17th century, there were over 300 coffee houses in London alone. These coffee houses, like in the Ottoman Empire, were places where people could purchase coffee and engage in stimulating conversations.
And despite the prevalence of coffee in the Muslim world long before it became popular in the West, this strong black drink was also feared by some Muslim scholars and rulers, many of whom debated its permissibility.
Some Muslim scholars believed the caffeine in it had mind-altering effects or that it could be intoxicating, and some rulers believed the social activities involving coffee were contributing to the decay of society, so it was banned during certain periods of time before being permitted again by successive rulers. It became fuel for many, but especially Sufi worshippers who needed to stay alert during their worship services, and today it's a highly enjoyed drink in the Muslim world, as it is in the rest of the world.
Turkish people say a single cup of coffee is remembered for 40 years, and they have a point.
And yes, we did talk about the dark history of coffee, but that's not to say there isn't some shady stuff going on today. There is still a lot of injustice going on with how coffee is manufactured before it reaches your mug, especially in terms of labour and the exploitation involved.
So you know what, maybe we are drinking more coffee than we need, or maybe it's time to switch to more ethical substitutes or just fair trade products that are ethical so that other people, animals and the environment don't suffer while we enjoy that devil's cup.
And we've reached the end of today's newsfeed. Find this show on YouTube and do subscribe to our channel. Bye, see you same time tomorrow.